Despite improved conditions for Christians in Tur Abdin, their survival has not received the all-clear. Danger may still lurk in the embers of fanaticism that constantly smolder in this region. The Syrian Orthodox Church is the institution that champions the cause of the Aramean population, and it does what it can. The role of protector and guardian is delegated to the parishes and to the few remaining monasteries, the real strongholds of Tur Abdin's Christian fabric. Ruins of monasteries that were active up until the turn of the 19th century are commonplace. Among the still functioning monasteries are two that are especially important. Deir az-Zafaran, the Saffron Monastery, lies southeast of Mardin, the largest city in this Turkish province. The name comes from the color of the local stone. Built in 493 AD, Deir az-Zafaran was considered the citadel of the Aramean Christians of Tur Abdin. For almost 800 years, from 1160 to 1920, it was the seat of the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate that is now located in Damascus. Today, only 2 monks live here. With the help of a handful of lay volunteers, they run a school for orphans and tend to the religious needs of the local congregation.
Okay, there's an old building also. They have most important Christian. They believe that before sun god, and this is before BC, about 2,000 years ago.
Our guide explains that more than 2,000 years ago, the oldest wing of the monastery was a temple to the sun god.
Follow me, please. Come in, don't worry, come in. Yeah, it is the old temples before BC 2,000 years ago, and this is a window. It's the sun raising the
There was a window here, facing east, before which pagans would gather to worship the rising sun.
Come worship for sun. And this part is for sacrifice, and people they give.
In the sacrificial area, animals were offered to the sun god.
More important is ceiling. You can see ceiling without.
These stone slabs are fitted together without the use of mortar or metal braces. They're approximately 2 meters high and simply fitted next to one another in 6 rows to the left and 6 rows to the right of a central row of keystones.
They hold each other like that. These doors are 300 years old.
The doors of the crypt that houses the tombs of the patriarchs are 300 years old. The church, with all its stucco work, ornamentation, furniture, and altars, is the work of Aramean craftsmen. The Patriarch's throne used to be in Antioch. On the back, starting from the middle, are the names of all the patriarchs that have succeeded each other through the centuries, from St. Peter to the present day. "300 years ago, these litters were used to take the patriarchs on long pastoral journeys along the rough, often hostile roads of Tur Abdin. The altar of the Virgin Mary is a masterpiece of Aramaean craftsmanship. It's entirely made of walnut wood, joined without nails or metal braces. At the foot of the altar is a fragment of the mosaic from the cave of St. Peter in Antioch that dates back 1,600 years. The time has come to say goodbye, but first our host has something to show us before we leave.
Look, down in Syria, Damascus, Patriarch. And those were monasteries. Mor Yaakov, Virgin Mary, destroyed by the enemies of our faith because religion hatred.
Oh, it's late. We have to get going if we want to arrive to Mor Gabriel before it's dark.
All right, because when you come down, Mor Gabriel, doors closed, right.
Southeast of Midyat, the monastery of Mor Gabriel is the geographical and spiritual heart of the plateau and the safest place of refuge in the entire region. Founded in 397 AD, it's not only the oldest surviving Syrian Orthodox monastery in Turkey, but also the most active one. Just in time. Every evening at sunset, the great iron doors are closed and will only be open again the following morning. Among the many activities here, the most important is the school. The monastery of Mor Gabriel is truly a bastion of Syriac tradition. Today, the walls, which in the course of the centuries have repelled armies and predators alike, serve to discourage those who would like to eliminate the very notion of Christianity in this region. The monastery of Mor Gabriel is the seat of the Archbishop Vicar of Tur Abdin, who has the heavy responsibility of keeping Syrian Orthodox Christianity alive in the land of its birth, and, when necessary, of offering the faithful a refuge in the monastery itself. But where is everybody? Oh yes, of course. Today's Sunday. The monastery has recently been restored, a long but rewarding job carried out with scrupulous regard for the original architecture. This is especially true of the church, that for years was used as a stable by Muslim hordes who showed no respect for the tombs of over 12,000 slain Christians. A few tombs, some mosaics, and the chapel of Mor Gabriel, the founder of the monastery, are all that survive of the original church. Renovation of the chapel included the narrow passageway through which the saint entered and left his cell to join his brothers or to pray in the chapel. We bade farewell to the tranquility of Mor Gabriel and set out on the long journey to Iraq, the third country that, along with Syria and Turkey, made up the Arameans' homeland. After overcoming a few unexpected bureaucratic problems, we arrived at the Marmatai Monastery in the region of Mosul. Renovation work is in full swing. Workers go about their business as we visit the chapel that houses the tombs of Marmatai and other saints. Among them is Gregorius Baribroio, who lived in the 13th century and is the most famous of all Syriac writers. Mar Banam is one of Iraq's most impressive monasteries. It was built on the site where, in around 382 AD, Prince Banam was murdered with his sister Sarah and 40 other Christians by order of his father Sennacherib, Lord of Nimrod, who would not tolerate his children's conversion to the religion of Christ. The building is considered the finest medieval Christian monument in Iraq. The church was built in the 12th or 13th century and has two magnificent bas-reliefs, one of Mar Banam on horseback triumphing over the devil, the other of Saint Sarah being baptized. Copies have been incorporated into the facade in place of the vandalized originals. Behind the monastery, on the actual site of the massacre, is a mausoleum that houses the remains of the two saints and the faithful who died with them while praying for the forgiveness of their persecutors. In the Iraqi villages inhabited by Syriac Christians, many churches have been destroyed by the ravages of time. But, as in Bartele, near Mosul, many new places of worship and community activity have been built in recent years. The Church of Mar Shmouni boasts a font that dates back to 1343. In Jerusalem, as we look over the rooftops and terraces on the slopes of the Hill of Zion, our attention is drawn to the little bell tower of St. Mark's Monastery. The monastery can only be reached on foot after threading one's way through the maze of tiny streets and alleys of the Tower of David area. It was built on the ancient site of the evangelist's home. An inscription in medieval Syriac, discovered in 1940 to the left of the main entrance to the monastery's church, testifies to this. It reads,
"This is the house of Mary, mother of John called Mark, proclaimed Church of the Holy Apostles and named after the Virgin Mary, Mother of God, following the ascension to heaven of our Lord Jesus Christ, restored after the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus in the year of the Lord 73.
After the Syrian Orthodox Church lost its other churches and properties here in the Holy City, the monastery became, and still is, the Archbishop's seat and center of Jerusalem's Syriac community. Tradition holds that this painting on leather of the Virgin and Child, of which a number of copies can be seen in many famous sanctuaries, is in fact a true portrait of Christ's mother, painted by St. Luke. Syrian Orthodox Christians are also present in Bethlehem. This Syriac church stands beside the spot where tradition has it that the three wise men rested while following the star. Tradition also declares that it stands on the very site of the inn where Joseph and Mary failed to find room. Given Mary's impending labor, they were forced to take shelter in the grotto, which has now been incorporated into the nearby Basilica of the Nativity. The only way to reach the monastery of Mar Musa, or St. Moses the Ethiopian, is on foot. Those who make it this far are received with open arms regardless of their faith. People come here to spend a day, months, or even years in meditation, study, and prayer. No wonder that the small resident community, a fine example of fraternal heterogeneity, is in a state of constant flux. An important Syrian Orthodox monastery for centuries, in the 19th century, Mar Musa changed hands and eventually fell into ruin. Now, run by the Italian Jesuit who is the power behind the renovation work, it's become a place of ecumenical hospitality to enhance the mutual understanding that embraces all Christians, no matter which confession they belong to, and to extend it to include Muslims and followers of other religions. Tradition says that the monastery was founded by an Ethiopian who traveled through Egypt and Palestine and settled in Syria, where he lived as a hermit and died a martyr. Mar Musa's position makes it an impregnable fortress, but appearances can be deceiving. It's open to all people of goodwill who can make the long and arduous 800-meter climb. In the end, we had to use the community's special transportation for our camera equipment. The terrain around the monastery is barren and inhospitable, traversed by tracks that are as difficult as the proverbial path to heaven. Only four-footed climbers negotiate them with dexterity and arrogant indifference. Newly arrived guests are given the grand tour by the community's young priest. Down below, the desert stretches eastwards as far as the eye can see. Among the many interesting sights are the caves where the monks once lived. Rain collected in large cisterns was their only source of water. Some of the caves have been converted into cells to host guests. Recently, the number of visitors has been growing steadily, and the construction of additional guest quarters is already underway. The monastery dates from the 4th century, but it took on its current shape in the 15th century when it became an important Syrian Orthodox cenobium. In 1982, it was in a seemingly irreversible state of ruin. Rebuilding has been a long and difficult task, financed by a school of restorers through a cooperative venture of Italian professors and local students. Most of the medieval frescoes have been saved, and it's hoped that even more will be recovered in the future. Among the frescoes, a large Last Judgment occupies the entire west wall. Precious manuscripts, part of the heritage of the Syriac Christians, have also been saved and restored, as well as Arabic inscriptions in a Syriac context. Fine examples of the Arabization of the Aramean Christians in the 11th century, and of a profound and wholehearted Christian participation in Arab culture. In fact, small groups of Arab pre-Islamic Christians, the result of 14 centuries of side-by-side coexistence, are still today Christians within a church based on the Syriac culture. Thus, the renovated monastery now safeguards a historic, cultural, and spiritual heritage within the greater scheme of Christianity as a whole. Kera means coconut, and Kerala means land of coconuts. At the southernmost point of India, the Aramaic heritage of the Syrian Orthodox Church dates back to the time when Thomas the Apostle landed here to spread the gospel message. It is a cultural and religious, not ethnic, heritage that has been passed down through the Church of Malankara, the Syrian Orthodox Church of Kerala, that recognizes the Syrian Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch as its figurehead. In the monastery of Malacruz near Cochin, we had our first meeting with 4 resident monks who live there with a few young students. Three monks, including the abbot, were educated in the seminary. The fourth is an ex-clerk of the Indian Post Office who, at the age of 40, felt the call of the Lord. He answered by giving up all his worldly goods and joining the monastery, where he has been living for over 20 years.